to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I should have thrown in Mr. Roman is here too.
Yes, he is.
But he won't share his.
Public comments. Members of the public are invited to address the authority regarding any items not listed on the agenda. Please complete one of the speaker cards in advance and hand it to members or anyone wishing to speak to us tonight. Seeing no one, I will now move into approval of minutes.
Move approval?
Have a first? Second. Oh, I have a second. Any more discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously. We shall now go into consent calendar.
Move approval?
Second.
First,
Second.
second.
Yeah.
Got it, Terry Ann? Any more discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimously. Now, see, we're just moving right along here. We now will move into major discussion items, regular agenda items. You ready?
Yes.
Legislative update.
Good
And
evening,
you brought
Chair
him down from the,
and Commissioners. Thank goodness I-80 is open this evening because I have with us our legislative advocate from Sacramento, Mark Watts, who is going to give you an update on all of the activities that have happened in Sacramento over essentially the past legislative year now that the session has ended. So without further ado, Mark, I'm going to let you take it away.
so Mark, you've endured, we've had some earthquakes, so we knew you were coming. And then we had a refinery blow up. So,
Chemical plant.
a chemical plant. So, oh.
Well, I'm just glad I
So
don't have,
anyway, we welcome you and thank you for showing up.
The locusts are
And no disaster
thank you.
The locusts.
I'm just glad you're on this side of the Carquinez Bridge. The Benicia Bridge is okay because I helped get that funded, so.
That's right.
Well, I'm pleased to be here, and I'm going to cover real quickly a little bit of the executive order that was released by the governor in the last couple of weeks, and then jump into some bills of importance to the county and to CCTA. So first of all, the executive order was issued, I forget the date, but I think it was 2 weeks from this week back. And there's been a lot of discussion in the media about what it means and all that. And it was further highlighted last week with the ITIP presentation that Caltrans made, where they proposed deleting 3 projects from the ITIP highway projects and putting the money in a reserve to be spent on rail or other projects that emerge from the executive order analysis that the secretary is going to take. So essentially, the governor said, here's a list of things I want state government to do, one of which was in the transportation arena, look for opportunities, and he wanted the secretary to lead this assessment, look for opportunities to leverage some of the current state money to use for climate reduction, climate impact reduction purposes. They've clarified since that, and the governor has said it again today, but the secretary said it last week, that they cannot change the law. They cannot go against the Constitution. So anything in the transportation arena will be dealt with in a way that meets the constitutional statutory guidelines. Beyond that, we had Speaker Rendon jumping in and saying, wait, when we passed SB 1, we made commitments to the voters. When we defeated Prop 6, we made commitments to the voters. And those commitments were, we will not change SB 1. And he stands by that. So, I'm standing there watching all this, and, we're ready to pounce if it were to go in a bad direction. But otherwise, I think it's straightening out. I just wish there was a little less opaqueness in the way they try to describe what they're doing.
I wish, because there was an editorial about it, and this is the first I'm hearing that it's gone back, that they're producing press on it, but they're not going to, I'm sure they won't.
Yeah, no, it was a rocky couple of weeks for the administration, and I think they still face a little bit of a rocky road ahead until they come out and show clearly what they plan to do. On bills of interest, I'm really pleased with several of the bills that we worked on your behalf as well as for the county's behalf. The first one I would notice would be Mr. Grayson's AB 1025, which puts behind forever the issue of old grants, 30-plus-year-old grants dealing with the Iron Horse Trail. I think when I look back over the last couple of years trying to get this done administratively, I think the legwork that was done by supervisors here in this room and others with certain individuals who were very sympathetic to our side, for example, Melanie Perron, who was at Caltrans and has been at the Secretary's office doing legislation, and Rhonda Pascal, who was in the Secretary's office and met with us and is in the Governor's office. They understood from all the presentations that this was a non-issue for the state and it should just move ahead with the bill. The bill was signed, so we're very happy with that.
Well, but if I can just add, Mark, you get so much credit for it because you were the one who was maneuvering it, and when they went and handled administratively, they sort of told you what they needed to have in a bill, and you worked with us to get Assemblymember Grayson to carry it. And
Yep.
when things started going sideways because of other Assembly members' involvement, you just kept reining people in. So thank you, thank you.
And it would be neglectful of me not to mention the role that your executive director had in the
Absolutely, Randy,
language.
thank you also for weighing in and helping where we needed you as well, because it's something that just opens up opportunities for this very important active transportation corridor that we have in Contra Costa County, and we're not limited to this little narrow band. We can do some really fun things.
Another bill that we started off strictly as a bill that would assist the authority in working with San Ramon for one of the bridges on the Iron Horse Trail is AB 1475 by Assemblymember Bauer Cahan. And she was convinced later in the process to expand it. So as long as a project is not on the state highway system, but it's anywhere else, a regional transportation agency, not just Contra Costa, but all the other ones, it's all right. Yes, I'll complete the statement. The author was convinced by a group of other folks, including labor and allies, that they should expand it beyond one project. I made sure that that was something that the staff and leadership here wanted, and they almost bit my head off saying, Woody, are you kidding? That's what we wanted you to start with. And so we ended up with a bill being signed by the governor that provides necessary CMGC. It stops short of allowing the work to be done by a regional agency on the state highway system, and that's our next battle at some point in the coming years because it involves the Caltrans Engineering Guild, called PEG. AB 1810 was a Transportation Committee bill. That bill was approved. It was threatened with some issues from the cannabis industry. That got straightened out, but in there was language that the staff brought to our attention that deals with who can sign bonds on behalf of the agency, and that clarifies the language that was adopted, clarifies that. In addition, very disappointing turn of events, SB 277 by Senator Bell that attempted to right-size or redirect the way that the local partnership program that was in SB 1 is to be administered by the CTC. The bill attempted to say 85% of the money was to go out on a formula basis to regional transportation agencies and 15% available for competitive process. The CTC had administered it on a 50-50 basis, and by vetoing the bill, they've got the ability to return to a 50-50 basis, which is disappointing. But the governor did say that he views the veto that gives the commission the flexibility to award funds to ensure program achieves other statewide goals besides investing in highways and transit. And finally, I think it's important to mention that a bill that was a threat all year long, SB 127, which deals with Senator Wiener's bill, which deals with requiring all shop project programs that the state administers on the conventional system. In other words, think of San Pablo Dam Road. That if they're doing work there, they need to fold in a complete street component to it. We had worked diligently on this throughout the year, and there was a lot of concern that it might be costly. And it turned out Caltrans finally did a cost estimate that said it would displace about $1 billion worth of shop heavy maintenance on those roadways throughout the state each year. And so the governor understood that and vetoed the bill. So that bill needs to be redone and come back in a different way with different funding. And that's my report for today.
Any questions, comments? Well, and again, I totally agree. I think what is really good with you, Mark, you know about our projects, and you know about our county. That really takes the darkness out and puts a different light on the subject.
Thank you.
So on behalf of the chair, speaking for myself, I'm very appreciative of you up there.
Thank you.
Good job.
We have a 4.1 new item, approval of 12th Amendment to an employment agreement with Randall Iwasaki, Executive Director.
Mr.
Ann.
Chair, I'm looking at your agenda, our agenda, and this caught my attention because of another agenda, but it said the last item was an action item, so I'll just go ahead and move to accept the report. I thought it was just informational, but it says action.
We leave it open just in case an action needs to
all
be
right.
taken.
Well, then I'm fine. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome. Okay, the recommendation for this item is to approve the 12th Amendment to the Authority's employment agreement with Randall H. Iwasaki, Executive Director, to amend his compensation to $387,368.62 per year, effective July 1st, 2019, to account for a 3.5% cost of living adjustment as approved by the Authority Board in April 2019 through the adoption of the publicly available pay schedule for fiscal year 2019-20. The term date will remain through April 15th, 2021. All other terms of the employment agreement will remain the same. This report shall serve as the Authority Board's report summarizing the final action on salary pursuant to the Brown Act.
I have a first.
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address this? There you go. You're back on. You're up, Ms. Derrick.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners, and Representatives. In June 2018, the Authority Board approved Resolution 1822A, which adopted the Authority's Salary, Benefits, and Compensation Plan for July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021. In January 2019, this was amended to adopt recommendations from the project's classification study. Tonight, we are here to suggest a further revision to that compensation plan, and that would be to add the Director of Planning to the Director of Planning position to the planning section, reallocate one full-time position from the Deputy Executive Director of Planning to Director of Planning, set a salary range for the position, amend the publicly available pay schedule for fiscal year 2019-20 in accordance with CalPERS. We review all of our vacant positions to ensure that they are still needed and whether they align with our long-term goals. Due to a recent retirement of the Deputy Executive Director of Planning, this vacant position was reviewed based upon the staffing levels in the planning section, the job duties and skills required, and internal alignment. It was decided that a Director of Planning would support the Authority's employer of choice goals, succession planning goals, and reduce short-term salary and benefits cost. At this time, Matt Kelly has been appointed Acting Director of Planning until the position is filled. We reviewed the salary in consultation with our HR consultant, RGS. It was based upon parity and internal alignment with other director positions such as external affairs and programs that we set the salary range for this position. The full-time equivalent positions will remain unchanged at 20. If approved, this classification will be used to fill the vacant position. A recruitment will be initiated by the end of October and an anticipated start date of mid-January. Staff seeks approval of Resolution 1822A, Revision 2, to amend the authority's salaries, benefits, and compensation plan to add the new classification of Director of Planning and amend the publicly available pay schedule to include the Director of Planning at a salary range of $12,408.28 to $16,763.88 per month to align with the other director classifications, and it would have an effective date of October 16th. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Questions, staff?
Move approval.
I have a first. I have a second. Is there any more discussion? Is there anyone from the public wishing to address this? Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
And good job. Thanks for helping us on that. New item, Interstate 680, I-680 high occupancy lane completion and express lane conversion project, 8001. You're up.
Good evening, Chair and board members. Ivan Ramirez, Director of Construction, and we're going to give you a brief update of the I-680 Express Lane and HOV conversion project. This is start with an overview here of the express lanes through Contra Costa County. Back in 2017, the south end of the express lanes was open in both directions. Since then, we have started construction on the project that I'm going to be talking about this evening. And that project is supposed to open late 2021 or early 2022. And in addition to that, we have a northbound express lane project that is in the environmental phase, and that it's to be determined when it's going to go out to construction. It's got numerous technical challenges that are being worked on right now. So this project started on the right footing. We had an engineer's estimate of $70.6 million, and the low bid came at $64.5 million. The project was awarded on July 18th to contractor Bay Cities Paving and Grading. I think it's a good time to express how happy staff is to work with this contractor. They have been extremely helpful, very accommodating, and in any way, shape, or form, they have been very cooperative with us. Having said that, the duration of the project was originally 700 days. First working day was October 1st, 2018. And like I stated on my previous slide, we are scheduled to open late 2021 or early 2022. This is an update of where we are in regards to budget. The first column there with the figures shows the allotment that was given by this authority. The second column gives us an update of the amount expended so far. So with the first line on top with the bid items, the original scope, we have spent $24.5 million. That amounts to 38% of the total value of the contract. The following two lines are the supplemental funds and the furnished materials, and those are not as critical because we encumber the amounts, but we don't spend it. We spend it throughout the length of the project. So even though with the supplemental funds on line 2, where it shows 65%, that's how much we have encumbered, but we haven't spent nearly enough. The important line is the bottom one where we have the contingency, and we have spent roughly 1.6 million. That's 23%. So if you took a one-to-one comparison between the original scope and the contingency, we're doing fairly well because the project has progressed 38%, but we only have used 23% of the contingency.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It's probably self-evident to everybody else, but I guess when I look at contracts and there's a contingency, it's for at the end if they've gone over. So in the first year, what were contingency funds used for? Is it like different phases? And so this was supposed to cost this much and it went a little bit over? I'm just curious how we can have contingency expenditures in the first year.
Yeah, so the contingency is like funds that are going to be used when things come up in the contract, change orders, namely, and that's where the money comes from because the original scope has the bid items, that's the contract amount, and we provide a contingency for unknowns that come through the duration of the project. So
That's what I thought. I just thought it would be helpful to have that on the record. That's when certain things are needed and we thought it would cost X and it's costing X plus something, that's when you use part of the contingency.
that's correct.
Something that we didn't think of or is an unknown condition.
True, right.
Yes.
Just a comment on contingency funds. I'd like this organization, and I'm trying to promote it in my own town too, is to watch these contingency funds because when you're putting 10% plus in a contingency fund, it allows a lot of leeway in what can be approved simply without ever going back to the original contract. Now, I know there's overruns. I know there's change orders. There's unforeseen items. But to me, 10%'s a little high for a project of this nature. Now, it wouldn't be too high if you're talking about $500,000 to $1 million. 10% is reasonable. When you get up to $64 million, there's a lot of absorption in there. And I know in Pinole, we did our treatment plant, and I was instrumental in getting that contingency fund down to 7%, which made it a lot harder for the contractor to come in with, and I'm not going to say they're not good contractors, anything like that, I'm going to say that, but a lot of contractors, when they start running thin, they look for bogus change orders and different things to put in there to catch up. And if it's in the contingency fund and you haven't gone over, then you're saying, well, we're still within the contingency fund. And I don't know if you get my point.
I know, I
Okay.
get exactly your point.
All right.
Yeah. So
I just like in
Commissioner,
the future, when these projects come up, to be a little more careful in how much you put in that contingency fund. Don't make it too easy for a contractor to say, well, we can use that up.
So Commissioner, how we operate is we tend to take a look at risk. We build our contingency based on risk. When the risk is retired, the money stays in the contingency. When it happens, we have to pay out. And typically, all of our change orders come to either executive committee and or the commission for approval. So we justify every single change order that we authorize to our contractor. A lot of what we're seeing here is things that manifest themselves during construction. So there's two ways of bidding work. One, we put the unforeseen conditions on the backs of the contractor, and so they're going to bid higher because they don't know what they see and what the errors are. Versus what Commissioner Pierce was telling you is that, or the other way is we absorb the costs for unforeseen site conditions, which is not so bad along Interstate 680, but it's worse on Interstate 80. So when we do work in your neck of the woods, Interstate 80, the as-built aren't that good. Is that correct, Mr. Ramirez?
yes.
So we hit things all the time on Interstate 80 versus 680, as Ivan was saying, progress is going very well. This is not a lot of money on a $70 million contract to have expended $1.5 million of your contingencies. We're in great
No,
shape.
I'm not saying that I don't mean to interrupt you, Randy.
No, it's okay.
I apologize.
No, please.
No, I don't mean to say that this is not well within the realm of what
Okay.
it should be. And I understand that. As you know, spent 45 years in construction. And I understand what overruns and change orders and unforeseen items are. I just want to make sure that it isn't too easy for somebody to say it's still within our bounds. So, oh, we look at that. Well, look at how well we're doing. We only got $1.5 million, and we got $6 million in the fund. No problem.
We fight very hard against Caltrans adding more work because they see we have more contingency.
Okay. Anyway, it's just a comment off the top. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment. And believe me, over the years, many people have made that comment. But what experience tells us is that our staff are really lean and mean about what they will allow. And so when these change orders come forward, primarily to the executive committee, because it's usually in between meetings, and in order to keep the project rolling, we need to go ahead and execute. And so we review these, and Ivan is incredibly diligent about giving us chapter and verse about exactly why it's needed and what these unforeseen conditions are. But they're pretty stingy with the money because anything that's left over in that contingency at the end of the project goes to another project. It doesn't just sort of evaporate. It's not there to be sucked up. It's there to be spent on something else that we might not have been able to fund. And so I know how building construction works with contingency. My husband was in that business for a very long time. I got to tell you, this agency is unlike any other. And our staff does an amazing job of watching every dime. So it's always good to be diligent, but thank you very much.
So, and that's why we provide this update, so we have comments from the board, and we hear from every single one of you. But if I can offer one more comment, from my personal experience, if you owe something to the contractor, even if you have exceeded your contingency, they're still going to want to get paid. So the contingency is just a number that you have in there, but if there's many projects that we read on the paper where the contractor, there's cost for increase in price, and the contingency is not there anymore. So, but I appreciate your comment, and like everybody else here in the meeting, we try to be very stingy.
Let me add one more comment to that. That's the reason why we worked very hard to get construction manager, general contractor, procurement law into the books for local agencies like ours. Because in the future, you'll work with the contractor and the design firm. So we try to make the designs as good as we possibly can. So Susan and Tim do a very good job, Stephanie and others, Jack, to make sure that the plans are done in a way that the contractor can build them. But once again, you're doing the plans in one area, and then the contractor bids those plans. And then if they don't mesh up with the existing ground conditions, you have change orders or existing conditions. So in the future, what we want to do with CMGC is we hire a contractor. Ivan or the authority will hire a contractor. We'll hire a design firm. And instead of at the end, one complains about the poor design and the designer complains about the poor contractor. They work together throughout the process on if you have traffic handling issues or you have barrier wall to take out or put back in. So all these kind of areas where the design may be a little weak, they're going to help strengthen that. And so at the end, what happens is the designer submits a bid, an engineer's estimate. The contractor submits a bid. We hire an independent cost estimator, and they submit a bid. And so if the contractor bids under both the engineer's estimate and the independent cost estimator, we award the contract to the contractor. The threshold, if it goes over by X amount of percent, whatever that threshold is, then we rebid it. But if it's within that threshold, we award the contract to the contractor that we hired initially. So then they work together, the designer and the contractor. You have better cost certainty in the future and better schedule certainty. And that's really what you're asking about is, in the future, why do we need a contingency? Well, we'll still probably need a little bit of contingency, but the plans and the cooperation will be a lot better on these very complex projects, because this is a complex project.
Well, number one, you're preaching to the choir, because I've been doing this for the last 15 years too, with the city. But the only thing I was coming on is to take a look at the contingency fund and find where it's at. What I saw in ours, and the reason I reduced it, was it was high-end equipment and low-end labor, and when compared to equipment costs on my project, which was the treatment plant, that's why we lowered the contingency fund on that. But no, I understand. It's a good education for people here who may not understand it. Thank you very much. But I understand everything you said. Thank you.
Any other comments? You done, Roy?
Yeah.
Cut your speaker off.
Oh.
Really? Just let you keep talking. I don't keep talking. All right.
Keep going.
Are you finished?
I'm trying to make it very short, but I want at the same time
I know. I'm
give you
sorry.
everything that we're doing. So, we have a very comprehensive outreach plan. We put quarterly newsletter where our external affairs director, Lindsay, helps us put those out. We also have a website where we have all the information, history, and what the project is about. And we also link it with our Twitter feed so that the website receives the updates from the Twitter. Everybody knows when the closures are happening. We're going to have perhaps noisy events, which I'll get to a little bit later. We have some of those. We also have a project hotline where people call We, of course, respond to all the comments and questions. Some of them are more pleasant than others, given where we are with the noise requirements or the noise that we're doing. So here's an overview of where we are with the project. Unfortunately, that orange strip went out, but that's something that we've just constructed. It's already, we're not going to do anything there other than restripe at the end of the project, and that's going to accommodate the new lane so we can put the express lane in the inside. This is looking southbound on 680. And we have done a lot of work. For those of you that drive 680 corridor, you have noticed that we have done a lot of work on the median. And that work basically is going to conclude here in December. We're going to install all the signs and all the gantries. So we're going to, the gantries are eventually going to have the changeable message signs where it shows the pricing. But so anyway, so that's progressing really well, the work in the median. Now here we are again looking southbound. This is at the south end of the project, and we're connecting with the express lane that was built just in 2017. And we are currently putting a sand wall, and it's supposed to be completed by the end of the year. Coming up further north, this is the Rutgear on-ramp, and here we are constructing an additional lane. Unfortunately, this moves too fast, but that's where the work's been happening, that orange stripe. And this is a picture at ground level, and that instrument that gentleman is using is called a nuclear gauge, and it tests the density of the soil to make sure it's dense enough before you put the next layer to prevent settlement. And if you ever want to hear a good story about nuclear gauges, you can talk to Randy Iwasaki, because he has a really funny one when he was an inspector like 40 years ago. That project is... So one of the things we did here proactively, and this is where that contingency comes in and where we spend some money, is that, you know, obviously we're doing work at night. We had to demolish an existing sound wall. And what we did is we paid the contractor to switch his operations during the day as opposed to night. So that would eliminate some of the work. And that, fortunately for us, eliminated a lot of complaints. This is one time when we had to pay. There's other times when we have worked with the contractor, and I will give you a couple of examples here where we haven't really compensated them anything, and they just have worked with us to improve the operation so that we're not making as much noise. I don't know if you remember at the beginning of the project, there was supposed to be a lane drop. So one of the lanes was going to be dropped, and the express lane was going to have to be turned off to allow for traffic. Staff working with our CM team eliminated that lane drop, and this is the location. So we maintain the existing capacity for the length of the project, and we maintain also the revenue for that express lane. And this is how it looks at ground level. You can see there's a very significant retaining wall that we put in there to accommodate the new on-ramp or the additional lane to the on-ramp. And this is the most critical part of the work, where the more heavy aspect of the work is occurring. We remove that retaining wall. This is where we receive numerous complaints, and there is no way to sugarcoat it. It was really noisy at night with the operations that we had ongoing, and we received a lot of complaints. But thankfully, we did some things to minimize that noise, and we expect to complete the new sound wall by 2020, the spring of 2020, and we're going to open the widening in the fall of 2020, just before we conclude the project. This is how it looks at ground level. That just to the left of that big wall, that's a temporary retaining wall. We're going to construct a new permanent retaining wall, and that's going to hold the traffic that we're going to that the new lane is going to use. And I'm bringing up this particular portion of the work here because we still have to do some demolition at night, and we're also going to be putting some false work, and that requires a lot of backup alarms. So what we had a few months ago, we had a lot of noise at this location, is going to be repeated. We're going to have the same amount of noise. And I just want to bring that up because we're going to get more complaints, and people, the representatives of Walnut Creek might get some calls from the residents. So we're going to reconstruct a new on-ramp. The way we have planned this work is to close that on-ramp for 2 weeks and allow the contractor to go and work. We're going to divert traffic through the orange path onto South Main Street. And that work is anticipated to begin in 2020. But again, working with the contractor, we revised the temporary K-rail configuration so that we could do some work. So we're already doing some work in there so that we minimize the 2-week window. In addition to that, we're going to be adding a second shift. So we're trying to bring those 2-week window into a 1-week window. So we're working on that right now, and hopefully we can get the necessary manpower and equipment to be able to get it done. And I want to show something that we're doing. We use a device like this in the field to take our observations and photos and keep track of the work. And one of the things that we found out is that if we're taking noise readings, that there is nothing really to validate it, just the inspector taking the reading and then writing it down. So we found an app, and we put it on our device here, and then we take the reading, and we immediately are able to take a snap photo, put it into our reports, and gives the coordinates, so it will always be validated where the noise readings are, because we're very concerned about public thinking that we're exceeding the noise limits, which we're not. And what makes it really neat is that you can tag it, so if one day somebody say, hey, what was your noise level on, let's just say, February 1st, 2020, you can just tag it, and it will give you the results immediately without having to go over it, look at all the paperwork. So this is some of the things that we do so that we keep on track and have the information that we need fast to retrieve, I should say. One last thing, we have the landscape project. As some of you may know, we cut a lot of trees, a lot of bushes. Some people were not happy, but Susan and her team are developing a plant establishment, and that's going to be coming up. We're going to be ready to start planning in the spring, but that depends on the operations of the contractor, how quickly they open up the space to do this planting. So to conclude, I want to say that the project as it is right now is scheduled to finish 1 month early from what was originally contemplated in the plans when we let the contract out. There are 2 big risks that can get in the way of finishing on time, or it might put us in finishing later. One is TransCore, which is the tolling equipment. They work for MTC. We're doing the heavy civil, putting all the facilities, but TransCore has to come in, put the fiber optics, and make the signs work, pull all the electronics. And what we heard at our last partnering meeting was that they are having a hard time staffing their projects. So Randy Wasaki, our executive director, contacted their chief executive officer because he's very concerned about this project ending later. But I don't know how responsive they're going to be to that, because if they don't have the people, they basically overbooked themselves. The second big risk here is PG&E. Everybody knows that they are very difficult to deliver the service connections that we need. As another approach that we have taken here, where Randy, Leo Scott, who is the PM for MTC, Tim Hale, myself, Susan, we met with PG&E and we told them where we need the connection points. We impressed upon them the importance of getting them on time. But it's disappointing that so far they really haven't responded. They really are not showing up when we need them to show up. So those are the 2 big things that might get in the way of this project finishing earlier, outside of the other construction risks like weather and so on. Okay, that concludes my presentation. So I'm open to questions by everybody.
Oh, okay, that's when I got thrown off, when I thought it was all done. You did good. You did good. A great presentation. I'm glad you brought us back on task. And you know what? I'm a layman. Everybody's up here have been doing this 40 or 50 years. All I do is get it. All I do is get on the road and drive. And if I like it, I get off the exit and I get back on the exit. But when you actually see something of this nature, it kind of brings you, wow, this is how it really happens. So the photographs and all, I really appreciate it, because it really comes down. It comes down to the layman's term, and now I can act like I've been doing this for a couple of months. Yeah. Anyway, this was I have
a question. Will you send us the link to that app for the noise reading?
Sure, absolutely.
That would be fabulous to have.
Who wants to get it?
Yeah.
Everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Will do.
I mean, when technology can take over for an expensive outlay of cash, that's great.
Anyway, this was informational, and you gave us a lot of information. It was good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, correspondence and communications, associated committee reports, commissioners, staff reports, commissioner. Oh, you want to hear a story? Okay, executive committee?
Commissioners, I just have, there's a lot of things that we've done, a lot of speeches. We're doing a lot of updates on the TEP to the various city councils. I have an update here. I'll give that to you. But before I get started, the only item I wanted to talk about is Lindsay and I went on a Saturday to the great community of Oakley, and we watched the city officials cut a ribbon to the first outdoor fitness center along a trail that's supposed to bring more people to the trail and ultimately a healthier community in Oakley. And the only reason why I mentioned that, if you go to nationalfitnesscampaign.com/news, you can see Commissioner Romick working out, and it's a great sight. It was awesome.
The link is in the executive director's report.
Yeah, nationalfitnesscampaign.com/news. I have a copy of the picture if you need me just to send it to you.
And is that it?
No, I have one. We hosted the California Legislative Staff Education Institute at Gomentum Station. So it was a number of staffers and from the Office of the Speaker, Rendon, Assembly Insurance Committee, Republican Office of Policy and Budget, Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, 21 folks from the legislature on an educational mission, find out what's going on with technology. They're heading down to the Silicon Valley. They stopped at the Pea Shooter-sized organization, and we took them through Gomentum Station, and they were amazed at the testing facility and what's happening. They asked how much the legislature has given or allocated to Gomentum Station. I said $3.5 million, but we have to match dollar for dollar. You know, in Michigan, the governor gave $50 million because he's trying to keep jobs in Michigan, and we got paltry $3.5 million. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We can do better than that. And I said, and by the way, we need a new bridge programmed at San Pablo Dam Road and Interstate 80. A few months ago, a truck carrying chickens hit the bridge, and then most recently, the movable barrier machine on its way to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to put a bicycle path over the top of the bridge struck the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. And so we sent a picture over to Lindsay Transportation Systems, which I know the CEO. Anyway, they pulled the machine off of a truck heading to New York, and so now we have the movable barrier machine. But the point is the bridge is too low. And so I said, for a mere $70 million, we can fix that problem. So hopefully they're working on that when they went back to Sacramento. And we'll have some contingency and possibly some change orders, but that issue will be resolved for Interstate 80, and I'm pretty sure, Commissioner, you are interested in that structure being raised. As far as progress on the 19 cities, now we're not talking about the county. The county voted yes, but we have 14 cities all approving the measure. We have 64% of the population in a majority of the cities. So we have 5 cities left: Antioch, Orinda, Pittsburgh, San Pablo, and Richmond. And so we're all scheduled out. So that's the progress there. So does anybody have any questions on the report or anything?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. Calendar is attached. Believe it or not, we're coming into Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. Remember, it's better to give than receive. Just thought I'd let you know that, particularly when it's that. So anyway, adjournment to the next regular meeting on November 20th. Is that all right with everybody?
That's all right.
Okay.
Good job, Mr. Chair.
We got